The wind howled through the narrow alleyways of the city, carrying with it whispers of secrets and promises of change. Ava stood at the edge of the old bridge, staring out into the fog that clung to the water below like a blanket of doubt. The city, once bustling with the noise of opportunity, now felt like a cage, suffocating her dreams with every passing second. But there was more than just the weight of the city on her shoulders. It was the weight of her own uncertainty, her own fear of failure, that held her back. In the heart of this tangled mess of thoughts was a question that had lingered for years. Can I ever truly break free? It wasn't just about escaping the city or running from the expectations of others. It was about escaping herself. What would happen if she took the leap? Would she finally find the peace she longed for, or would she fall into the abyss of her own self-doubt? The road ahead was unclear. Ava knew there would be challenges. Faced with the unknown, she'd need more than just courage. She'd need a transformation, a journey into the depths of her own soul. It wasn't just the external world that needed to change. She needed to discover something she'd lost along the way, a part of herself buried under years of fear, failure, and missed chances. The fog swirling around her seemed to mock the confusion in her heart. But she had to move forward, because if she didn't, she'd never know whether the life she was meant to live was just an illusion, or if it was truly waiting for her. Just on the other side of the bridge. Ava had always been the quiet type, the kind of person who observed rather than participated. People knew her as the thoughtful one, the one who preferred the corners of rooms and the safety of her own thoughts. Her life had followed a predictable pattern: work, study, and the occasional social gathering, all wrapped in a neat little package of mediocrity. But that was before the moment everything changed. It began as a whisper, an idea that felt like a calling. She was tired of waiting for life to hand her the perfect opportunity. What if she could be the one to create it? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Could she really step outside of the comfortable, predictable life she'd built? What would happen if she failed? Her internal struggle was a daily battle. On one hand, there was the longing for something more, something bigger than herself. She wanted to be remembered, to make a difference, to chase something wild and untamed. But on the other hand, fear held her in place like a vice. The fear of disappointment, of rejection, the fear of falling short of her own expectations, and worse, the fear that she might not even have what it takes. The call came unexpectedly, like a thunderclap in the middle of a quiet evening. Ava had been sitting in her apartment, her mind once again tangled in a web of doubt, when her phone buzzed with an email notification. She didn't expect much. It was probably just another reminder about the upcoming work deadline or another task added to her already overwhelming list. But this time, it was different. The email was from a company she had admired for years, an opportunity to apply for a role she never imagined herself capable of. It wasn't just any job. This was a position that could change everything. It promised not only the chance to work on projects she'd always dreamed of, but also a new environment, new people, and the freedom to challenge herself in ways she hadn't thought possible. It was the very leap she had been too scared to take. For a long moment, she stared at the screen, unsure how to react. Was this the universe testing her, or was it the last push she needed to finally make a move? The weight of the decision hit her hard. Taking this step would force her to confront all her fears. It meant leaving behind her comfort zone, her safety net, and everything familiar. But what would happen if she didn't? Would she continue to let her fear define her? Or would she step into the unknown, risking everything for a chance at something greater? As if on cue, a knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She hesitated for a moment, then opened it to find Anna, an old friend from college, someone who always seemed to have a way of cutting through Ava's self-doubt. Anna wasn't just a friend. She was the kind of person who believed in possibilities, who was never afraid to take risks, and who saw potential in people even when they couldn't see it in themselves. "I heard the news," Anna said, her voice full of excitement. "I think you should apply." Ava felt a rush of warmth and uncertainty. "I don't know, Anna. What if I'm not ready? What if I fail?" Anna stepped inside, giving her a reassuring look. "You won't know unless you try. This is your chance to prove to yourself that you're capable of more than you think. You've been talking about wanting a change for years. This is it. Don't let it slip by." For the first time in ages, Ava felt the stirring of hope. Perhaps Anna was right. Perhaps this was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. But the fear didn't disappear. It remained, quietly gnawing at her from the edges of her mind. "Do you think I can do it?" Ava asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Anna smiled. "I know you can, but only if you believe it too." The conversation left Ava with a new sense of urgency. If she didn't act now, the chance might never come again. The stakes were clear. If she failed to take the leap, she would remain trapped in her life of quiet resignation. But if she succeeded, she could finally break free from the self-imposed limits that had kept her tethered to a life of mediocrity. After a long pause, Ava made up her mind. She would apply, and she would give it everything she had. The first setback came faster than Ava anticipated. She had spent the next few days preparing, researching the company, tailoring her resume, and crafting the perfect cover letter. It felt exhilarating to be working towards something so important, something that truly mattered. Her excitement built as she hit send on her application. But the days that followed were filled with growing uncertainty. The email she'd received had been clear about the next steps. An interview would be scheduled only if her application was successful. And then, after what felt like an eternity, the email came. "Thank you for your application, but we regret to inform you that we have decided to move forward with another candidate." Ava stared at the words, her heart sinking in her chest. The crushing weight of rejection felt familiar, but no less painful. She had poured everything into this, her hopes, her energy, her belief that this was the moment when things could change. And yet, the universe had rejected her once again. For days, Ava tried to shake off the sting of failure, but it gnawed at her. She couldn't understand what had gone wrong. Was she not good enough? Had she made a mistake in her approach? There were so many reasons she could point to, but none of them eased the hurt. Then, just as the disappointment began to settle in, her phone rang. It was Anna. "I saw the email," Anna said, her voice steady but concerned. "But I also know you. This doesn't define you, Ava. You've been knocked down before. What are you going to do now?" Ava felt a wave of frustration rise within her. "I don't know. It feels like every time I try, I fail. Maybe I'm not cut out for this after all." Anna's voice softened. "Ava, this is just one setback. It doesn't mean you're not capable. You've always found a way to bounce back. This time is no different. You need to keep pushing forward." But Ava wasn't so sure. The doubts had a firm grip on her now, and they whispered the same things over and over. What if this is a sign? What if you're not meant for more? She questioned herself with more intensity than ever before. Maybe Anna was right. Maybe it was just one setback. But what if it wasn't? What if it was proof that she wasn't meant for success? As the days passed, Ava withdrew into herself, avoiding friends, cancelling plans. She spent her nights staring at her phone, her thoughts swirling in a sea of confusion. Her self-doubt was overwhelming, and with each passing day, she wondered if she had the strength to continue. The stakes had never felt higher. If she didn't find a way to keep moving forward, she risked letting the fear win. The journey she had started so eagerly now seemed like a distant dream. Was it too late to turn things around? Or was this just the beginning of a much longer, harder fight? Ava had always been the person who played it safe. She had a good job, a steady income, and a life that others might envy. But deep down, she knew it wasn't enough. The emptiness she felt every morning, the aching sense of something missing, gnawed at her. She kept pushing it down, telling herself it was just a phase, that eventually she'd be satisfied with the life she had. But each day, the yearning grew stronger. The quiet voice inside her, the one she had ignored for so long, began to scream. Her decision to act on this desire was met with resistance. At first, it was just small doubts. Was she really ready to take this leap? Could she afford the risk? But as the days passed, the doubts grew larger, more tangible. Her mind became a battleground where every step forward was met with a step backward. She hesitated, and with every moment of hesitation, the world around her seemed to grow more suffocating. It was the pressure of it all that gnawed at her the most. She had always felt like an outsider, never truly fitting in, but now it seemed even worse. Friends, family, and colleagues all had their expectations of her. "Why can't you just be happy with what you have?" they'd ask. But Ava couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling inside that there was something more she was meant to do. And yet, the weight of her fears threatened to crush her before she even took a step forward. She couldn't shake the thoughts of failure. What if she was wrong about her potential? What if the world didn't need her after all? What if, in the end, she was just another voice lost in the crowd? Each night, she'd lie awake, her mind racing with scenarios, some hopeful, others crushing. The question gnawed at her. Was she strong enough to face this? Could she overcome the deep-rooted fear that had held her captive for so long? Or would she always be that person stuck on the bridge, never daring to cross over? And yet, deep down, Ava knew that there was no other choice. The longer she stayed in her safe bubble, the more she would lose herself. She didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain. If she didn't act now, she might never get the chance to find them. So she made a choice. A terrifying, uncertain choice. It was time to confront the fear, to step out of the shadows and into the unknown. The days after the rejection were a blur for Ava. The sting of failure had dulled into a quiet, persistent ache, a reminder of how close she had come to a dream she couldn't quite grasp. But as she spent more time alone, a shift began. Slowly, she found herself looking inward instead of outward, questioning not just her application, but her entire approach to life. One evening, as she sat at her desk, staring blankly at her computer, she opened her journal, a habit she had abandoned years ago. She began to write, not about the rejection, but about everything that had led her to this point. Her fears, her past failures, her endless search for validation. She realized something important. She had been measuring her worth by the things that others valued. The job, the status, the approval. She had spent so much of her life trying to meet external expectations. She had forgotten what she truly wanted and what truly mattered to her. It hit her then, like a wave crashing into the shore. She had been so focused on achieving success that she had neglected the growth that came from the journey itself. The rejection wasn't a sign that she wasn't good enough. It was a sign that she needed to change her approach. If she wanted to succeed, she had to be willing to face the hard truth about herself and her habits. With this realization, Ava started to see her struggles in a new light. The pain of failure wasn't the end of her story. It was a part of it, a stepping stone to something better. Each mistake, each setback, was an opportunity for growth. She wasn't failing because she was incapable. She was failing because she had been looking at things the wrong way. Success wasn't about proving herself to others. It was about proving to herself that she could overcome her own limitations. Over the following weeks, Ava began to change her mindset. She started embracing the discomfort that came with taking risks, seeing it as a sign that she was on the right path. She stopped focusing on the end result and instead began to appreciate the process, the learning, the small victories, the moments when she had to dig deep and keep going. One afternoon, she found herself walking through a park, her thoughts clearer than they had been in months. She stopped by a bench and sat down, watching people pass by. It was then that she understood something crucial. Her journey wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence, about choosing to get up every time she fell, about learning and evolving. She had been chasing a destination, but the true value of her journey was in how it changed her, how it made her more resilient and more capable. She smiled to herself, a quiet, confident smile that felt foreign but right. Ava knew now that she was on the cusp of something bigger, not just a career, but a transformation. The next step was uncertain, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. Armed with her newfound insight, Ava decided to take a different approach. She wasn't going to throw herself into another job application just yet. Instead, she focused on something she had neglected for far too long: her own growth. She signed up for a few online courses in areas that interested her, even ones that weren't directly related to her field. She began networking, not just with the intention of finding opportunities, but to genuinely connect with people. She asked questions, listened intently, and started building relationships that were rooted in authenticity rather than the pursuit of success. At work, she became more proactive, offering ideas and solutions during meetings. She stopped second-guessing herself, trusting that her instincts had value, even if they were different from others. Slowly but surely, Ava began to gain confidence. The projects she worked on became more fulfilling, and her colleagues started noticing her drive and initiative. She was no longer just going through the motions. She was actively participating in her own evolution. But the real test came when she saw another job, opening for a position that was very similar to the one she had applied for before. Her heart skipped a beat. The old anxiety crept back, but this time, she recognized it for what it was: a challenge. She wasn't the same person who had applied for that job months ago. She had grown, and she now understood that rejection didn't define her. It was simply a moment in a much larger story. Before submitting her application, Ava did something different. Instead of rushing to complete it out of a sense of urgency, she took her time. She crafted her resume with care, thinking about her journey, the lessons she'd learned, and the person she had become. Her cover letter wasn't a list of accomplishments. It was a reflection of her growth, her resilience, and her commitment to embracing the process of becoming. When she hit send, there was no longer any anxiety or fear, just a quiet sense of determination. This time, she wasn't asking for validation from the outside world. She was doing it for herself, for the person she had become. A few days later, she received the invitation for an interview, but this time, Ava didn't feel the pressure to prove herself. She felt calm, focused, and confident. The stakes had changed. It wasn't about whether she would get the job. It was about whether she had truly embraced the person she was becoming. But even as she prepared for the interview, another challenge loomed on the horizon. The job was competitive, and there were others just as qualified, if not more. Ava knew this would be another test. Was her growth real? Or had she just been fooling herself into thinking she was ready for something more? As the interview day approached, Ava felt the weight of the challenge. But this time, it wasn't a burden. It was a chance to prove to herself that she could face whatever came her way. The morning of the interview arrived, and Ava felt an electric buzz of nervous energy run through her. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her blazer for what felt like the 100th time. The reflection staring back at her was different from the one she had seen months ago. There was confidence in her posture, determination in her eyes, but there was also a quiet hum of fear beneath it all. The kind of fear that she had learned to embrace. The fear that told her that the stakes were real. That this was a make or break moment. Today wasn't just another interview. Today was the culmination of everything she had been through. Everything she had learned. It wasn't just about whether she would get the job. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of handling the kind of responsibility, pressure, and challenge that came with the opportunity. If she succeeded, she would cross a threshold into a new life. But if she failed, she risked falling back into the cycle of self-doubt that had once consumed her. As she walked into the office building, her heart raced. The air felt heavier than usual, as if the weight of the decision pressing down on her was about to explode. She knew there were others competing for the same position. The stakes were higher than they had ever been before. If she failed now, it wouldn't just be another rejection. It would feel like the confirmation of every fear she had ever had about herself. The fear that she wasn't enough, that she couldn't measure up. When she entered the interview room, the panel of interviewers greeted her with polite smiles, but their faces were serious. There was no room for pleasantries in a room like this. This was business. This was a battle. "Thank you for joining us, Ava," one of the panelists, a woman with sharp glasses and a no-nonsense demeanour, said. "We've reviewed your application and we're impressed with your background, but we need to know more than just what you've done. We need to know what you can bring to this role and how you'll handle the challenges that lie ahead. This is a high-pressure position, and we need someone who can rise to the occasion." Ava swallowed hard, but she felt the familiar pulse of adrenaline kick in. She had prepared for this. She had rehearsed her responses, written out notes, and even visualized the entire process. But now, sitting in front of them, everything felt different. The stakes had never felt higher, and despite all the lessons she had learned along the way, she couldn't shake the feeling that one misstep could undo it all. "We're particularly interested in how you approach challenges," the woman continued. "Tell us about a time when you were faced with a difficult situation and how you handled it." Ava took a deep breath and launched into her story, one she had told countless times before. It was about the time she had been tasked with leading a team through a project that had initially seemed doomed. She told them about the sleepless nights, the overwhelming pressure, and the doubts that clouded her every decision. But then, she explained how she had turned it around by focusing on the team's strengths, communicating openly, and making tough decisions with limited resources. She highlighted her ability to stay calm under pressure, to listen, and to adapt when things didn't go as planned. As she spoke, Ava realized that this wasn't just a recount of a past experience. It was the embodiment of everything she had become. Every lesson, every failure, and every moment of self-doubt had led her to this place. This was her moment to show them, and herself, who she had become. The panelists nodded thoughtfully, but there was no relief in their expressions. The questions kept coming, each one more difficult than the last. They asked about her ability to handle conflict, about her leadership style, about how she would adapt to a company culture that was vastly different from what she was used to. They poked at her weaknesses, and she answered with vulnerability, acknowledging the areas she still needed to improve. There was no room for pride or pretense. Ava had to show them that she wasn't just a collection of accomplishments. She was someone who was still learning, still growing. But just when she thought she had made it through the hardest part, they hit her with a question that froze her in her tracks. "If you're hired for this role, you'll be expected to take on a major project almost immediately," the man at the far end of the table said. "What if, halfway through, everything starts to fall apart? How would you recover from that?" The question hung in the air, thick and heavy. Ava's mind raced. This wasn't just about managing a project. It was about managing failure, uncertainty, and chaos. She had faced setbacks before, but this was different. The pressure was suffocating. The fear threatened to take hold, to drown out everything she had worked for. Her throat tightened. What if she couldn't handle it? What if she failed in front of them? What if they saw right through her? And then, in that moment of panic, something clicked. She remembered the journey. She remembered the fear, the rejection, the failure, and the lessons she had learned along the way. She wasn't the same person who had started this journey. She had faced fear head-on, learned from her mistakes, and grown stronger with every challenge. Taking a deep breath, Ava looked at each of them in turn, steadying her voice. "If everything starts to fall apart," she said, her words calm but firm, "I would first take a step back and reassess the situation. I wouldn't panic. I would communicate with my team, figure out where the gaps are, and make the necessary adjustments. I've been in situations where things didn't go as planned, and I've learned that the key is to stay flexible and focused on the bigger picture. The project might be falling apart, but that doesn't mean I have to." She paused, letting the words sink in. Failure is a part of every process. The important thing is how you respond to it. I don't shy away from challenges or setbacks. I rise to them. For the first time in the interview, there was a shift in the room. The tension eased, and the panelists seemed to relax, exchanging glances. Ava could see it in their eyes. The same spark of understanding she had felt when she first realized that her journey wasn't about avoiding failure, but embracing it. They asked a few more questions, but the rest of the interview felt like a blur. Ava left the room with a sense of calm she hadn't expected. She didn't know if she had nailed it. She didn't know if she had gotten the job. But she knew one thing for sure. She had shown them who she really was. Now, all she could do was wait. A week passed after the interview, and Ava could feel the tension building with each passing day. It was like the universe had conspired to make her wait, long enough for her doubts to creep back in. She found herself analysing every moment of the interview, wondering if she had said the right things, or if she had revealed too much of her vulnerability. What if they didn't think she was enough? What if they chose someone else? Someone with more experience, more polish. Someone who hadn't stumbled through their fears the way she had. And then one quiet afternoon, an email appeared in her inbox. "Dear Ava, we are pleased to inform you that after careful consideration, we would like to extend an offer for the position of project lead. Your experience, insight, and growth during the interview process made a lasting impression on us, and we believe you are the perfect fit for the role. We look forward to having you join our team." Ava's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the email, the words sinking in slowly, almost as if she needed to reread them to fully believe it. She had done it. She had faced her fear, taken the leap, and succeeded. But even as the excitement bubbled inside her, she realized that this success wasn't just about landing the job. It was about the transformation that had happened within her. She had changed in ways she hadn't fully understood until now. Throughout the process, Ava had learned that success was not a singular, destination-like moment. It was a series of small steps, decisions, and internal shifts. The person who walked into that interview wasn't the same as the one who had submitted the application, and she certainly wasn't the same as the person who had been paralyzed by fear of failure not long ago. She had learned to embrace her fears, to confront them head-on, and to trust in her ability to adapt and grow. Her journey had taught her the most important lesson of all, that failure was not an end, but a part of the process. That growth didn't come from avoiding mistakes, but from learning from them. And most importantly, that her worth wasn't defined by the outcome, but by her willingness to keep moving forward. As Ava clicked accept on the email, A calm confidence settled over her. She knew there would be more challenges ahead. This new role would push her in ways she hadn't yet imagined, but she felt ready for them. No matter what came next, she knew she was capable of handling it. She had proven that to herself. The tension that had once gripped her, the fear of being unworthy, of falling short, had been replaced by a quiet assurance. Ava wasn't just someone who had succeeded. She was someone who had grown, someone who had learned to trust herself and the process. And that, more than any job offer, was the greatest reward of all. Looking back, Ava could see how far she had come. The person who had once been afraid to even apply for a new role was now stepping into a new chapter of her life with quiet confidence. Her journey had been filled with doubt, failure, and setbacks, but it had also been marked by a deep and powerful transformation. Ava had learned that growth was a continual process, not a destination. There would always be more challenges to face, more obstacles to overcome. But she now understood that the true value was in the journey itself, the ability to learn, adapt, and rise after each fall. As she sat back in her chair, staring out the window at the city below, Ava allowed herself a small smile. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready. And even if she hadn't gotten the job, she knew the journey would continue. Because no matter what happened next, she had already won.